And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide.
Nicole Wallace should be out of a job. Even Rachel Maddow made comments politicizing that moment. I mean, here he's a young man that loves law enforcement, wants to be a police officer, was honored to be an honorary Secret Service agent. This is everything that the left loves to hate. And it's really disgusting that they stoop to bullying an innocent young child who so many Americans watched that moment and felt it was one of the most powerful moments of the evening, a unifying moment that everybody should have stood up for. And you have people like Nicole Wallace and Rachel Maddow making just disgusting commentary about him. They ought to be out of jobs. Net Network ought to be shut down. It's really a sad thing to see.
All right, guys, big show headed your way. So much to break down. Trump never, ever disappoints. People keep saying, how long is he going to keep going like this? I told you before, buckle up. We're going to get 4 years of constant action, achievement. He is not slowing down. He gets it, and we see it every single day. So much to break down. Bill O'Reilly's going to be with us tomorrow. And I will tell you this. He's been critical of Elon Musk. And I'm going to ask him about that because I want to know what his issue is with Elon and why he's got a problem. Remember, you can always subscribe to my newsletter, SeanSpicer.com. It's free. I do love a good VIP subscription, though, but sign up to keep up to date with all the stuff that we can't fit in the show and my take in my columns every week. Before we get into that, if you started your day like I did today with a great cup of coffee, you got to align your purchases now with your values. And I do it every day with Wired to Fish coffee. Look at this. This is because the bag is almost empty. I got a brand new one upstairs, by the way, because I ordered a whole new, I'll tell you about the bundle. And these guys, if you go on the website, Wired to Fish, it's the numeral 2, by the way, you'll love who founded this company. They are great people who love to go outside to fish, right? They love a good cup of coffee. They love to align their values. And so they not only brew a great cup of coffee, but they give back consistent with their values to clean water initiatives, to faith-based initiatives. These are people who love Jesus, love a good cup of coffee, and love some time on the water fishing. This is the way that you should start your day. Align your values and your shopping with the way you voted in November. And like I said, they give back 25% of their profits to organizations that I can get behind. So go to Wired to Fish coffee. And guess what? Not only will you get coffee, but right now you can get the Spicer bundle. Now, I had to I bought this, just so you know. I went out and ordered the bundle myself. I believe that much in it. It's a great brand. You can get the Yeti Sean Spicer Wired to Fish coffee mug for, part of the package with some of the coffee. So head over to Wired to Fish coffee right now. Use the code WeCare for 10% off. I mean, you won't trust it. Speaking of which, if you actually want to expense this and you're someone who runs your company, you in charge of the employees or you're the owner of it, get yourself a Ramp card. If they're trying to expense stuff like Wired to Fish coffee, you'll know about it. Why? Because Ramp is the new software management system that is a huge time saver for your company. I signed my team up for it. I talk to guests all the time that say they signed up for it. It makes your life so much easier. It takes care of all the expense processing so that you don't have to be chasing around receipts and setting limits. It allows you to do all that. They issue virtual cards and then actual Visa cards like any other Visa card that you would get, but Ramp issues them so that your employees can have limits set on where they can shop, what they can do, their travel, all sorts of stuff. It makes life so much easy. And teams spend about 80% of their time doing tactical busy work. That eliminates it all. It flips the equation, allows your team to be focused on what they're supposed to be doing, not running around collecting receipts. It's a free card. It's literally, there's nothing that costs you money except it saves you time and money. They've got this white glove onboarding system to help you get started. It takes like 15 minutes to get going. It's unbelievable. And right now for a limited time offer, I mentioned the money, you can get $250 in your pocket just by signing up for Ramp. Go to ramp.com/Spicer, ramp.com/Spicer. Get yourself some money in your pocket and save time and money when you set your company up to use Ramp. Cards are issued by Sutton Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. All right. It is my pleasure to bring in our amazing Thursday panel. Natalie Winter, the co-host of Bannon's War Room. Steve Cortez, my former colleague at Newsmax and political consultant and former Trump senior operative. And Jen Pellegrino, the senior director of media affairs and chief spokesperson over there at America First Policy Institute, also a former colleague there at Newsmax. All right, guys. Good to see you all. Steve, I loved President Trump's State of the Union address. And I wondered, did everyone else agree with me? Because, look, I know where I stand. I know where you stand. But you see the CBS YouGov poll come out. 76% of people approved of his speech.
Right.
63% said that he spoke about issues that people care about. 68% feel that hopeful. And 63% say that he's a plan. I actually thought that was shocking.
Yeah.
I didn't think that they would like it.
You know, it was those numbers are fantastic. They were surprising to the upside for me. But by the way, confirmed by similar numbers out of CNN. But you're right. In a country that is politically polarized, where most issues, most politicians divide this country, roughly 47-47, and then we fight over that middle few percent, to have 3/4 of Americans say, just overwhelmingly, super majority say that this was a positive message. This is the right agenda for our country. It's quite momentous. And I would also say this. It's not just the positive case laid out by Donald Trump. It is primarily that. But I think it is also the despicable behavior of the Democrats who acted like petulant children. So it's both sides, I think, there really worked in favor of President Trump. His positive vision and also the childish antics of his opposition.
Jen Pellegrino, you guys over at America First Policy Institute have to be happy with the litany of issues that he brought up. It was literally, I kept thinking to myself, all of these things as a conservative that I've been fighting for decades, that America First Policy Institute helped lay out during the 4 years in the wilderness, he's talked about, he mentioned implementing. And you guys had to be sitting back, I think, going, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You know, Sean, we were certainly beaming with pride hearing that speech Tuesday night. We're thrilled to see these America First policies front and center in a way that they haven't been really in decades. And to see, again, the mandate that was delivered in November, the response in that polling from CBS, from CNN, with the American people saying, we support what President Trump said. And yes, he focused on the issues that were important to us. It shouldn't be surprising. I guess it is, considering how things have been in the past and the support that our movement hasn't received. But we've seen a ton of momentum, and the American people really just want to get back to common sense. And that's what was outlined during that speech Tuesday night. And again, sad to see that so many on the other side of the aisle couldn't support a lot of common sense issues, a lot of great everyday Americans that brought their issues to the table and the solutions that President Trump delivered. But man, what a winning night and an exciting time, and historic length in that speech as well, because he accomplished a lot in just 43 days.
You know, Natalie Winters, I've heard a lot of speeches, and you get a lot of applause. In fact, they build it in, like, how long are you going to, like, but the thing that I thought was different about Trump's speech, I want you to take a listen to this clip. Take a listen and tell me what you think is so different about normal addresses to Congress in this one. Take a listen.
$40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million. $8 million for making mice transgender. This is real.
All right, Natalie, I mean, I'll just let you say it. I just found it so different than a normal State of the Union or joint address.
Well, look, I think it's a direct result of just how absolutely absurd the Democratic Party has become. And I think more precisely, it was really a mask-off moment for Democrats, where we've seen that, frankly, there is no compromising with people who will not applaud or clap for 13-year-old survivors of brain cancer. There's no compromising with people who are just okay telling the American people that they want our borders to remain open, and they think that it's okay for young Americans to be killed and brutally murdered by illegal aliens. But I think another really strong victory, just from sort of an analysis perspective of last night, I don't know about you guys, but I certainly got kind of deja vu, or I guess maybe I should say PTSD, to the first Trump administration. I think we've seen the so-called resistance this time around really rely right on lawfare, using the courts, the TROs to sort of block President Trump's agenda. And they've always made a very clear case that they want to sort of avoid the pitfalls or the trap of what they did the first time around, because they think it sort of led to fatigue among the most devoted of their kind of grassroots activist base. But what did you see on Tuesday night? You saw Democrats up to their old antics, the protesting, the walkouts, and even outside the speech, all across the country. You had these mass demonstrations, all, of course, paid protesters and astroturfed activists. But I think it's interesting, and I think the tell is that they feel as if their sort of new approach to resistance isn't actually working. So they're going back to their old tactics.
Yeah. We talked about the resistance. We talked about the guests. And there was one clip that I thought surmised it all about that encapsulated what I just couldn't believe how ridiculous the opposition was to his speech, his guests, his policies. Take a look at how Nicole Wallace of MSNBC reacted to that adorable young child DJ being named an honorary Secret Service agent by Sean Curran, the director of the Secret Service. Take a look.
But I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ, and I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
Oh my God. I mean, I literally, if I had asked Chat GPT, think of the craziest thing that somebody could have come up with post Donald Trump. I don't even know that AI could have done that, Steve Cortez.
Yeah, listen, what a dark heart was revealed right there.
That's it. That's the right word. Yes.
It really is. It's a dark heart to remark about a wonderful young man, a boy who has defeated cancer, we hope for good, and to instead instill and inflict a political agenda upon him and have outlandish predictions about what his future might involve, including suicide. It just reveals how poisoned her spirit is, unfortunately. And it's not specific, though, only to Nicole Wallace. It's systemic within the corporate media and particularly cable news. Listen, all 4 of us here have spent a lot of time on television. I'm sure all of us have seen a lot of awful moments, particularly when it comes to cable channels like MSNBC and CNN. I worked for both of those networks, by the way. I have never seen a moment as awful as this one. This was truly a new low.
Steve, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Nicole Wallace should be out of a job. Even Rachel Maddow made comments politicizing that moment. I mean, again, a 13-year-old boy who's still battling cancer, brain cancer, talks about he doesn't know when the Lord is going to take him home. Here he's a young man that loves law enforcement, wants to be a police officer, was honored to be an honorary Secret Service agent, gave President Trump a hug later in the Oval Office, gave him a cowboy hat. This is everything that the left loves to hate. And it's really disgusting that they stoop to bullying an innocent young child who so many Americans watched that moment and felt it was one of the most powerful moments of the evening, a unifying moment that everybody should have stood up for. And you have people like Nicole Wallace and Rachel Maddow making just disgusting commentary about him. They ought to be out of jobs. That network ought to be shut down. It's really a sad thing to see.
Natalie, I keep thinking every time that people stoop to a new low, something like that happens. And I'm like, who says that? I mean, who goes there? To Steve's point, what a dark heart that you think, God, I hope that person doesn't commit suicide. What the hell is going on in a person that goes there after such a touching moment?
I actually had the privilege to interview DJ just briefly yesterday on the White House lawn. I have never met, I think, a more patriotic, kind-hearted, just happy warrior who just loves this country and loves President Trump. And you know why I think that moment hit so hard over not just at MSNBC, but probably across networks, is because how many years have they spent trying to brainwash young children, not just into hating cops, hating law enforcement, frankly, the entire country, into believing that, Nicole Wallace had DJ Daniel, had it been under Kamala Harris and they invited a 13-year-old who, got a transgender surgery, Nicole Wallace and that entire panel would be applauding it and saying, wow, look at this brave hero. This is so amazing. But I think DJ Daniel represents that, I'm sorry, MSNBC, there actually are some kids out there who look up to law enforcement, look up to cops and want to be them and don't just want to be, trans propaganda fed young children. Like they would probably love to have this entire country be full of.
And Natalie, by the way, congratulations on that interview because it was fantastic and I saw it everywhere. I mean, all over media. But
Natalie Winters is everywhere now.
It was fantastic. But what it revealed, I think, is that not only is he just an inspiring boy, an inspiring young man, but he's also funny. I mean, he's funny and he's fun. And that just came totally across through your interview. So thank you for doing that. And I think it's important, not just for our side, it's important for America, quite frankly, right? Because, out of the Biden years, after Bidenomics, this country mentally was in a bad state. And that's not my opinion. I mean, all polling shows that, right? Americans overwhelmingly depressed, pessimistic about the future, think the country's headed in the wrong direction. So it's not just the policies. Those are key, of course, and they are primary. But in addition to that, we need to lift spirits. And I think what President Trump did, what you did, Natalie, and most of all, of course, what DJ himself did is help lift spirits to believe that we have a really, really bright future for this young man and for all Americans.
Sean, if I may add just real quick, before I interviewed him, and it was just sort of like an everything happens for a reason moment. It wasn't planned. He was just walking by when I was live on air on War Room and I asked him, do you want to come on the show? But before, he had actually been speaking with Caitlin Collins, and she had her producer filming the two of them going back and forth. And they probably had like a 10 or 15 minute exchange. And they talked about a lot of wonderful things, why he wanted to be a cop. But I thought it was really funny because if you watch the clip that she decided to play on her show, she only played the 20-second hit where DJ brings up Elon Musk and how he was there present and sort of the back while they were having a meeting and how he asked for like a Cybertruck or something along those lines. And just speaking of the continued politicization, right, of him, I just thought it was so telling, right, that of that entire nice exchange that they had, she was perfectly pleasant, but that they would sort of weaponize their soundbite, their clip with him to just further the attacks on Elon and the idea that, he's the shadow president everywhere. So just more despicable acts coming from the media. But I guess that's what we should expect.
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. And I just kept thinking, I hope this kid doesn't see the Nicole Wallace clip or the Caitlin Collins, because I think he thinks. Jen, I want to switch topics, though, because yesterday we saw the Vice President Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard go down to the border. Wow. Actually going down to do this. And this is a clip of what J.D. Vance had to say after viewing the situation down there.
We took the helicopter ride over here and we saw a big chunk of border wall. And I said, is that the federal government's border wall? And they said, well, it was ordered during the first Trump administration, but Joe Biden wouldn't let us actually build it. Governor Abbott, of course, was the one who actually helped us put a lot of that stuff up. And of course, that stopped the flow in a pretty profound way. We'll talk a little bit more at the press conference, but as you saw, the president said yesterday, I think it's maybe the most important part of his speech, is that we didn't need new laws to secure the border. We needed a new president, and thank God we have that. I've heard already from a number of the folks that I've talked to in Border Patrol that all we needed to do was empower these guys to do their job. Thank God they have done their job. We're thrilled that they've done it. And now we've seen, I think just in this area, border crossings go from about 1,500 a day to 30 a day. That's simply the President of the United States empowering these professionals to do what they do so well.
Jen, two things out of that. One, the line, I thought that was the most powerful line of the speech, by the way, that we just needed a new president. And secondly,
yes,
the idea that you've got now an administration that's telling the Border Patrol, actually go do your job. You can do what you really wanted to do, which is to keep us safe.
Imagine that. They now have support that for 4 years they never received after endless criticism, finger pointing at them for simply trying to do their jobs and protect the American people. Now they can finally get out there and do it. And you see that in the numbers, the number of ICE deportations, the number of apprehensions, the number of crossings that have gone down in relation to what we saw over the last 4 years has really been remarkable. And you heard from Tulsi Gabbard down at the border as well, talking about, about 100 apprehensions that were made of people that had terror relations, right? And only eight remained in U.S. custody. The rest were released into the interior of our United States. So they're going to get to the bottom of that. And it's just so great to see this action. I mean, J.D. Vance speaking there about the gaps in the border wall and the wall that was set aside by the last administration. I saw that firsthand, Sean. And
Me too.
It was unbelievable to see that you have these massive gaps. Anybody can just walk right through. And boy, did they ever. All hours of the day and night, thousands of people coming through a day. Now you're seeing a tiny fraction of that in the time that President Trump has been president compared to what we saw in just one day under Joe Biden. So thrilled to see that this has really turned around. And as you said, and as the president said, it turns out all we needed was a new president.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sean, I think this is an important point because some Americans may not realize this if they're not deeply into this issue. There's probably no area of policy and American law where the president has more unilateral authority than the border by statute. Not just by practice, but by statute, the president in some ways has almost monarchical power when it comes to the border. Now, Joe Biden very much decided, right, not just to abdicate that power, but in fact, to create the incentives for a mass trespassing, a bull rush into America. We see now with President Trump and with Vice President Vance, exactly the opposite. And I know you folks talked about being at the border. I was actually just there as well, filming a documentary. If I can do a shameless plug, ittle be out next week. But filming
where can we see it? Plug away, plug.
Yeah, it'll be on my Twitter on Monday. On Monday, it's Bad Hombres for the win about how the Texas border counties all went for Trump.
I knew you were going to say that.
For the win. But one of the things I discovered there that was both appalling and now also reassuring, given that Trump's in office, is that some of the technology on the wall, so sensors and cameras, et cetera, some of that technology, which was installed before Biden, okay, by the way, was installed by both Obama and Trump in Trump's first term. The Biden administration literally, and I learned this from the local law enforcement, literally hit the off switch. They turned it off on purpose. It was stuff that was paid for, that was working, effective technology at deterring illegal crossings. Well, that switch has been flipped back on. So that dereliction of duty, thank goodness, is done. And we are back to a commander-in-chief who believes in sovereignty, who believes in protecting this country, and is going to use every resource possible, whether it's human or physical, to make sure that we make it really, really difficult to enter this country without our permission.
By the way, I will say this. I went and saw the same thing that I think all of us did when I visited the border for the first time. The idea that Biden literally said, stop, do not do anything, and then ultimately started to sell it off and turned off the machines and the cameras, et cetera. You cannot make the argument on the left that they didn't have an open border if you realize how much they did to allow people to come in unchecked, right? It's not a debatable point. And I know the left likes to argue it is, but Steve, your point is so well taken that when you literally turn the cameras off and you don't even use existing technology that you don't have to do anything else for, and you say, stop building and sell it all off, you are literally that's your goal. You cannot dispute that. Natalie, I want to talk to another thing that came out big in the news today. There's an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education. And he wrote to Linda McMahon, take all steps necessary to facilitate the closure within the maximum extent appropriate permitted by law, meaning he's trying to say, okay, I get it. We might need Congress to fully shut this thing down, but I want you to dismantle it as much as possible. We've talked about this on the right for decades. Send it back to the states. Let the states do what's best. Put this closer to people so that they're not trying to fight a faceless, nameless bureaucrat in Washington. This is a big, huge win for the right.
Yeah, I have to say, aren't we all glad that we are Trump supporters here? Because this is a pretty awesome agenda that we get to defend. I don't know about you guys. I would much rather like outline the case as to why we need to abolish the DOE as opposed to, I don't know, having to defend all these ridiculous USAID contracts. But look, I think this represents sort of, the Trump administration's final acceptance and realization that the DOE is not something that can be reformed from within. And frankly, I think you see that conclusion replicating agency by agency, right? They don't just want to go in and tinker around with it a little bit, doing, piecemeal reforms for 4 years. They want to get rid of it because the problem is not just the bureaucrats who are embedded in it. The problem is that it exists with the power to influence education across states, frankly, across the world. And I think it's a wonderful step forward. Obviously, there's going to be extensive, copious amounts of Democrat lawfare to push back against this. So I think he's being a little tricky, probably, I guess, clairvoyant, right, with the way that he's wording how they want her to take all the legal steps to do so. But just like you were saying, we didn't just need a new president for border security. I would go a step further and say, I think we need a new Congress on most things because they've proven themselves pretty ineffective, so especially on border security. They need to step in, not just defund and abolishing the DOE, but I would also add USAID and all these other government agencies that a lot of these, left-wing political apparatchik type judges have tried to step in and interfere with President Trump's clear constitutional authorities to do so.
Jen, speaking of judges, the court gave President Trump a bit of a setback last night, ruling 5-4 that he has to allow the USAID funding to go through. The first thing I've said over and over again is I think President Trump, regardless of how it turns out, gets credit for fighting. So many times in Washington, the answer is we can't do it or this isn't allowed. And Trump says, screw it, I'll try. And he gets credit for trying because I'm so sick of the excuses in Washington, D.C. about why we can't do certain things. But I am concerned. If you think about where the court should shake down, you had Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, one of his appointees, ruling against him. And there was just some people calling it online the death stare or the death, look that she gave him during the State of the Joint Address. I just am concerned that she's going to be the thorn in his side because if these decisions come down 5-4, that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem that way. It was pretty shocking to see. And again, President Trump has the backs of the American people. He's doing what he promised on the campaign trail. Nothing here should be new to anybody. This is what the American people voted for. And we want this wasteful spending to stop. And, I just have to say, going back real quickly to education, we spend the most of any nation in the world on education. And we ranked, I think, number 40th among other nations. So that's another area that needs to stop. And we, applaud Linda McMahon. President Trump said he wants to put herself out of a job. We'd love to have her back here at AFPI. She's very much missed. But we do applaud the work that she's doing, and we're glad that it's going to be sent back to the states as far as education goes. But again, it would be nice if Washington would at least listen to the American people because this is what they want right now. It's unfortunate to see what's happening in the courts.
Yeah. All right, Steve, I want to ask about Hamas in just a second. But before I do that, you want to talk about leadership. President Reagan said it best when he said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We're seeing that all over the world right now. It's not passed down in the bloodstream. It's got to be fought for, protected for, something that President Trump, I think, clearly gets, which is why he's fighting for peace. That's why those words are so relevant today, and preparing the next generation to lead is critical, which is why I want to tell you guys about the Great American Leadership Program. It's a one-of-a-kind summer summit at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library Foundation Institute out there in Simi Valley. If you've not been, this is so on the bucket list of everybody. So if you're a middle schooler, a high schooler, or a family that wants to dive into the core of American values, sharpen your leadership skills, and walk in President Reagan's footsteps in the library in beautiful Simi Valley, this is not going to be your typical summer camp. This is a summit. You get to go through all of these crises, acting as the president in the Oval Office, playing military advisors in the command center, even members of the press. You get to see what that's like, or be one, and have fun doing that. Spots are limited in this summit. Don't miss this chance. Make this a family affair, or if your kid's really interested in government or has an interest in politics, this is something you don't want to miss. Spots are limited. It actually expires on March 15th, this special code that I'm going to give you. Go to reaganfoundation.org/summer, ReaganFoundation.org/summer and enter code SPICER25 for 25% off of this. Listen, guys, freedom isn't guaranteed. It's passed on. This is something you will definitely not want to miss. Steve Cortez, I want to come back to you. If you wanted, I didn't know if you were looking to weigh in because I want to talk about the president's warning to Hamas before we get going, but
Oh, yes. Just quickly on education, what I wanted to say is, and I think this is important, what President Trump brings here is a private sector mentality, right? Because, of course, he became a politician very late in life. And I had a long private sector career before I got into politics with Donald Trump as a middle-aged guy, switched careers. And in the private sector, in my business career, in Trump's business career, if you are spending more and more money on a line of business and you're getting worse and worse results all the time, and that's what we have right now in education, you shut that business down because it is not working. So the more we spend, the worse educational metrics we get, whether it's test scores or really just being functional citizens of this country. And so it makes to me perfect sense to say the Department of Education is a 4-decade-plus experiment that has not worked. Let's return those money, those resources, those responsibilities back to states and localities where it belongs.
100%.
And
100%.
Steve, to add on that, and Sean, both you and Steve being parents, this restores power and the voice to the parents. We all remember the struggle that we've watched play out in classroom school board meetings throughout the country over the last couple of years. Talk about some of the curriculum going on in classrooms. Let's get back to reading, writing, science, math, the basics, and away from this nonsense DEI. And so much of that will take place when that power does go back to the states.
100%. I told people this morning on the morning meeting edition, when we were doing this, I was like, guys, I can go down to the Alexandria City Hall and talk to the people there or fight to get my school board elected. I have no idea who these people are in Washington, D.C., and I certainly can't go meet with them. Accountability matters. So if you don't like the curriculum, at least if it's at the school board level, so send those funds and resources to the states, let them get administered, and then let those people actually have a say and face voters as opposed to a bunch of faceless bureaucrats. All right, I want to pivot to Hamas because the strength that President Trump has shown, I think, is good, but also I'm a little concerned, and I'll tell you why, Steve Cortez. He sent this truth out, and he says, Shalom Hamas means hello and goodbye. This is to Hamas. You can choose. Release all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it's over for you. Here's the thing. I think that kind of leadership, if I were them, I'd be like, guys, we got to go. But I also am concerned that if they don't follow through now, whether it's Israel or us supporting Israel, Hamas may say, oh, so this to me is him putting a lot on the line in Gaza, right? And I think it's like, okay, which I'm happy for, because after 4 years of Biden's feckless leadership, the idea of being like, we got the full might of the U.S. behind you. But if we don't follow through, that could be a concern.
No, I agree. Like, to some extent, you can say that Trump is now on the clock, right? When it comes to Hamas. You're exactly correct that they have to produce, or there needs to be a response directly from the United States. I'm somebody who firmly, of course, supports Israel, who thinks that Hamas is an evil terrorist organization, but also wants American involvement to be incredibly limited in Gaza. And I would disagree with some of my colleagues on the right on this issue, but I think it's something that Israel can and should take care of largely on its own. So I'm not sure exactly what President Trump is up to here. I'm a bit puzzled by it, quite frankly, but I will also let you know that often when I'm puzzled about what he's doing, he's seeing around a corner that I'm not, and perhaps that's the case here.
Natalie Winters, you know who puzzles me right now? Zelenskyy. I don't get this. This was a deal. It's like put the ball on the tee and hit it, brother. That's all you had to do. I was literally at the White House last week, randomly on Friday when this all went down. I've never seen anything like this. This guy literally had to come, shut up, actually dress up, not do nothing. So he had to dress up, look the part, and say, thank you, Mr. President. Let's go have lunch. I signed the deal. Let's go. He blew it up. And then last night, there's this video that comes out that people are like, it doesn't seem like he wants a deal now. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Because the only one, in my opinion, and I'm not just saying, is Donald Trump, who can actually strike a lasting peace.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to publish a revision to The Art of the Deal to make it The Art of the Deals, because there are so many parallel just trajectories going on right now, whether it's the Middle East, Ukraine, our southern border, abolishing all these agencies, all these departments. But yeah, I'm equally perplexed by Zelensky's behavior. And I think really the only way to answer it, I think if you look at sort of the timeline of what happened on that fateful day of the Oval Office meeting, he had come off of a Hey Adams meeting with a bunch of globalists, a bunch of senators, the people, frankly, who've been gassing him up not just for months, but for years, right? The idea that he represents democracy, he is on the front lines of democracy. And for that reason, he's beyond reproach. He's beyond criticism. It doesn't even matter if, I don't know, he launders $200 billion worth of, United States taxpayer dollars. And if you just look at how he's been perceived, I mean, the week before that meeting happened, a bunch of senators flew over to Ukraine and gave him a standing ovation, right? So you almost, I mean, I don't feel bad for the guy, but you almost feel bad for him because that was the first time, really, since the outbreak of this war, that he has actually been talked to from a standpoint of reality, right? As opposed to gassing him up and saying, hey, you're the greatest thing to ever happen. And just real quick, I think President Trump, much like he's taking, I would say, a unique approach to the whole Hamas and Gaza situation, I don't think that you can disentangle what he did in terms of the TSMC, right, $1 billion investment, the 5 factories in Arizona in terms of semiconductor and supply chain security, because what was the number one argument that you always heard from the sort of globalists? Oh, well, we can't let Ukraine fall because then China's going to invade Taiwan and we need those semiconductors. He's taking an out of the box approach to really bolstering American national security that isn't the sort of forever war, neocon globalist warmongering mindset. And that's why the American people elected him.
And I'll just say that I don't think any American sitting at home watching that Oval Office meeting with Trump, Zelensky, J.D. Vance felt sorry for Zelensky. It's been far too long of America giving out handouts. And you know what? There are a lot of Americans that have been suffering over the last 4 years. I have not heard people cheer so loudly as they did to see that exchange. And I think it was a beautiful thing. We needed to see it. And President Trump is taking the right direction on this, I think. But we'll see how it plays out, of course.
Jen,
Natalie,
go ahead, Steve.
Natalie, I think you make a great point, though, also about the American allies of Zelensky, his sort of amen chorus in Washington, D.C., because what do they have in common with Zelensky? It's that they both want this conflict to continue. The Washington war machine loves it. Defense contractors, think tanks, a lot of the bureaucrats in the federal agencies, they want this war to continue. Zelensky, largely, no matter what he says, wants this war to continue. Why? Because once it ends, he has to face elections that he will very likely lose, and perhaps lose badly. So unfortunately, if you look at their incentives, the incentives of the globalists in Washington, D.C., and Zelensky, those incentives are largely aligned, but they are not aligned at all with the American people, and certainly not with the agenda of President Trump and J.D. Vance, who I think did us an enormous service by standing firm for America's vital national security interests, not the globalist elites.
You know, I always tell people that too many times people focus on the chaos and the process and not the byproduct. So, Steve, to your point about one of the things that happened that no one's paying attention to is Europe is stepping up. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, said, we're going to put boots on the ground and planes in the air. Yay. What did French President Macron say? We're going to up the GDP, the percentage GDP we spend on our own national defense. He said, quote, I want to believe the U.S. will stay by our side, but we have to be ready in the case that it isn't. Europe's future should not be decided in Washington or Moscow. And yes, the threat from the East is returning. The innocence of these 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall is over. Hey, guess what? Kids, it's time to move out of the house and grow up. It's time that you actually started to get this is the proverbial go get a job. We've had their back. This is their backyard. And the idea that they're finally going, hey, it's maybe time that we actually could do it on ourselves is a good thing. And no one's giving Trump credit for that.
No, and they absolutely should. And by the way, to connect it to the financial markets, which was my former job, we see serious fallout in financial markets. What I mean by that is European bond markets are selling off, meaning that their interest rates are going up. Why? Because there's an anticipation in capital markets that all of a sudden Europe is going to have to seriously spend on defense. They're going to have to do what we have been doing for them. We have been effectively their security sugar daddy for 80 years. That is ending because of President Trump. He's saying, wait a second, the wealthy nations of Western Europe can finance and build their own security. And because of that, interest rates are going up. Well, guess what, guys? Welcome into the pool. The water's warm. We've been doing this for decades, running crazy deficits in part because of our massive defense building, much of which is to protect you. So the right response would be, number one, take responsibility for yourselves. Number two, say thank you. Whether it's Zelensky or Macron or anybody else, say thank you to the United States. It would be much appreciated.
Jen Pellegrino, speaking of time to grow up and time to, learn to be on your own, Hunter Biden detailed his financial situation in a court filing yesterday, said that he's struggling, okay? After daddy gave him a pardon, apparently he remains saddled with debt, and he was forced out of his home that he was renting by the Pacific Palisades. And apparently, and this is according to a report in Politico, he's just not able to sell the paintings the way that he was. He's moving only one painting in the past 14 months, compared with 27 in the past 3 years. He reported significant debts and lackluster sales of his memoir. Jen, let me ask you a question. I've been thinking about this. He was able to sell 27 paintings in the last 3 years and only one in the past couple months. What do you think's changed?
Bidenomics, I guess. I mean, my goodness, I guess that's the definition of it right there. My goodness, it's amazing how he was selling these paintings. Suddenly he was this accomplished artist of these, abstract paintings selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And obviously a lot of daddy's friends were buying those paintings and paying top dollar for them. But I guess that well has dried up now that we have America First leadership here in Washington that's not so much interested in that kind of garbage.
Natalie Winters, are you buying this crazy conspiracy theory that Jen Pellegrino's throwing out, that Hunter Biden only sold paintings because his dad was president of the United States, and as soon as his dad went out, apparently his artistic qualities weren't that good and people stopped by? I don't know that the evidence is there for that.
Hey, maybe after all the USAID funds dried up, a lot of his customer base, it's been a tough time for the Hunter Biden family. But look, I will say too, I guess maybe on a more serious note, I also think it's probably interesting because I bet if you could get access to the financials of the other probably more nefarious business deals that he was concurrently pursuing while his father was in office, or even trying to now, that it's probably a similar pattern, which I guess confirms everything that we all know. I will say, though, I think the most interesting fallout of the way that the Biden presidency ended, right, by him not stepping down, the Democratic Party obviously detesting him, and just his reputation, I think, being sort of destroyed on the world stage, right, in terms of the fact that people think that he no longer has any political power or clout, is that there's no foreign countries who are going to want to do business with him anymore.
Right.
So it's really bad for the Biden crime family.
All right. It's time for winners and losers as we end every Thursday. I always get, you guys always do the great job of coming up with them, and I end up with nothing. So I made like 4 of them today. Steve Cortez, I'm going to start with you. Who do you think the loser of the week is, and who's the winner?
Well, loser, I'm going to stick with Zelenskyy. He is absolutely the
that
loser.
was on my list. Okay.
He is the loser of the week, I think for fairly obvious reasons. And I'm glad that he got the talking to that he needed. The winner, we talked a lot, understandably, we talked a lot about DJ Daniel. I want to talk about the other young man who was recognized, and that's Jason Hartley. And he's the one who was informed that he was admitted to West Point. He was informed right there in the middle of the president's address. Tragically, he lost his father a few years back. As a young man, he's apparently just an incredibly accomplished athlete and student. He wants to serve this country. He's going to go to West Point. And by the way, West Point and the other academies are going to get cleaned up by this administration. The woke nonsense is going to leave. So he's going to be a true warrior for this country. Congratulations to him. I think he's the winner of the week.
All right, Jen Pellegrino, who do you got?
So loser of the week, I think, is pretty obvious. It's those that couldn't stand up during the joint address and obviously praise DJ Daniel.
There's another one of mine.
All the other great Americans. I mean, it's so obvious, but I mean, it really makes you sick. That collectively with those on television like Nicole Wallace, Rachel Maddow, who had to make it political and had to still be bullies about it. I would say winner, the America First movement, of course. I can only imagine the millions of Americans sitting at home watching that speech, cheering on so much of what the president said. He had a couple of his famous one-liners that we always love to see. And I can only imagine how they felt compared to what we saw in Washington. It's much louder than any of the silence that we saw in that room. And a second thing I would note as another winner, it's about to be cherry blossom season here in Washington, D.C. A lot of tourists come to town. President Trump told the mayor, Muriel Bowser, you got to clean up the city, get rid of these homeless encampments. It'll be really nice at some point. I don't expect it to happen overnight, but for the city to be cleaned up and look like the nation's capital should look.
All right. Natalie Winters.
You guys already took all the good ones, so I'll go with my loser being probably Justice Amy Coney Barrett for doing what she did, read all things USAID, and my winner, not to sound cliche, but I'm
Can I
gonna
ask
go with
Natalie, do you think, just real quick, do you think that that was a one-off, or is she going to be a thorn in his side?
I think, I mean, she has been a thorn in his side, right? There've been
Okay.
previous decisions. I don't think this is necessarily new behavior. Although there is some, I think, nuance to the USAID decision,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's more for, retroactive grants, but I digress. The winner I'm gonna go with, again, not to sound cliche, but the American people, because that was such a wonderful joint session address, and the fact that Black Lives Matter Plaza is going to be renamed.
Oh,
Off. So
yeah,
I will have to walk by it
that
on
was
the way
awesome.
to it.
Mayor Bowser, Jen brought her up, name checked her. Not only is she being told to clean up the city, but no more Black Lives Matter Plaza there on 16th Street, which is a traffic disaster and ridiculous. So I'm glad you touched on that. All right. I had multiple losers because I'm always in awe of you guys, but I'm going to go with Skype. I don't know if you know this because you guys took all the good ones. Skype is going to be gone May 15th, I think it is. Microsoft saying it's going away from Microsoft Teams. Yuck. That to me, Microsoft is my loser. I'm still, maybe because I still have a MySpace and an AOL account and a Friendster. Like, I don't know. To me, that's upsetting to me. Although Lin-Manuel Miranda, the owner of Hamilton, is also a loser because apparently he tried to pull a stunt and say that Hamilton wasn't going to play at the Kennedy Center. And Rick Grinnell called him out and said, you actually had already called the press before you talked to the Kennedy Center. It was a political stunt. So I call him out on that. My winner of the week is the White House comms staff, because the professional nature by which they presented this joint address, the guests, the rollout, the briefings, the response, that doesn't just happen. It was President Trump that delivered it. We all get that. But that team deserves a ton of credit for how they made this happen. And I don't think staff gets praised enough. I've been there on both sides, sometimes when you screw up and like they deserve credit for how well they executed this joint address and the follow-on. It's brilliant. So I think they deserve, credit for all of that. And I appreciate, the staffer in me is always there. I mean, Steve knows that. You give credit to the boss, but at the end of the day, you still every once in a while appreciate a good shout out. So those were always as awesome. My favorite part. I always love to hear where you guys come out on this. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, Bill O'Reilly's going to be here. He's going to give us his critique and why President Trump shouted out that O'Reilly said he was the best president ever during his CPAC speech. I'm going to ask O'Reilly why he thinks that. This guy is an amazing historian. He knows all the presidents forward and backwards, where he thinks President Trump really does rank and why. That's tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Always appreciate you being here. Remember, you can go to SeanSpicer.com to sign up for the latest newsletter. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.